In the last video, I showed you how to execute a procedure stored on the database server from Java using JDBC and the callable statement. This is often the preferred approach for many enterprise organizations. In the last example, we passed a set of data to the stored procedure, which in turn managed inserting that data appropriately into related tables in the music database. In addition to passing data as parameters into a procedure, there are a couple of ways to get data back. First, MySQL has 3 different types of parameter types for its procedures. The in parameter is a read-only parameter and the default type, meaning we don't have to specify the keyword in our MySQL procedures if it's the type of parameter you want. This is data you pass to the procedure and it doesn't get modified. The out parameter is a write-only parameter. You must specify the out type for this one. The in-out parameter is a hybrid parameter, so you can pass data in, which the procedure can modify and return. These types are specific to MySQL, but many vendors have similar types. The syntax just might be slightly different. This is where JDBC is an advantage because you, as a developer, don't really need to worry about the syntax, just the concepts and how to interact with code that has these different parameter types. I'll start first with an example of the out parameter. To set this up, I'll open up my development session on my SQL workbench. I'll expand the stored procedures and click on the Add Album procedure there and select the tool icon. This opens the edit window and I can edit this. I'll add a new line after the localhost value in the create definer statement. The use of create definer is important in situations where you want to control who can execute this procedure. In this case, this means the procedure will get executed with dev users privileges. Right now, you don't have to worry about too much about this statement or the code in this procedure. This first bit is added automatically if you create a new procedure. What I want to do here is change the procedure name from addAlbum to addAlbumReturnCounts. By doing this, I'll actually be creating a new procedure with this name. Before I save this though, I'll add a 4th parameter. I'll start with the keyword out, and by convention this is uppercase. My parameter name will be count and its type is in. I can also change my other 3 parameters and include the keyword in, and I'll do this. It's usually best practice to explicitly specify the in parameter type, though not required, as you saw. I'll hit the apply button. That will pop up the DDL script that will get executed. I'll hit apply again, then finish. I'll refresh the schema panel and I should see my new procedure there. So I created an app parameter, but I didn't actually do anything with this parameter in my code. I still have the procedure up in the edit window, so I'll scroll to the end of this code. Right after the commit, I'll set the count variable to the value in the I variable, which will tell me how many songs got inserted. I'll say again, don't get too stressed about the code in this procedure. If you follow along with me, this should compile fine, and you don't really need to understand all the details about how this works. I've also included this procedure script in the resources folder if you have any troubles. You can drop your version and import the script like I showed you with the first procedure in a previous video. For now, I'll again apply that twice and then hit finish. I'll open an SQL edit panel and delete all my data for Bob Dylan again. So that's delete from music.artists where artist_name equals and Bob Dylan in single quotes. Now, let's get back to IntelliJ, to the prepared statement project from the last video, and to the class I was using previously, music callable statement. In this code, I'll change the name of the stored procedure that gets called in the callable statement code here. I'll run this now, executing the new stored procedure. This time, I get an error for each attempt that the parameter named count is not registered as an output parameter. There are a couple of problems here actually. First, I need another question mark as a parameter placeholder in the call to this stored procedure. So I'll quickly add that, and I'll try running this again. And now this works and data gets added. so registering an out parameter isn't actually required. You register the out parameter if you want to get the data back. Since I don't want the result that gets passed back in that parameter, I'll show you how to do that next. To get that data, there are two steps. Before the execute method, I need to call register at parameter specifying the index as 4. The second parameter is the data type, and I'll set that to types.integer. Types is a class in the java.sql package which defines constants used to identify generic SQL types called JDBC types, which will be translated to Java types. That's the first thing that needs to be done to get data returned on the callable statement. The next part is to retrieve this data from the statement after it's executed. I'll print the number of songs and the album name. I can get the output parameter's value by calling getInt and passing the appropriate index, so the index is 4 here. Before I run this, I want to again delete the data for Bob Dylan, so I'll jump back to the MySQL Workbench session and re-execute the delete artist statement there. And now, back to IntelliJ, I'll run my code. Before all the records are printed, notice the two statements there. 13 songs were added for the album, Bob Dylan, and 14 songs were added for Blonde on Blonde. So that's a demonstration for two-way communication with a stored procedure. Next, I'll create a third procedure in MySQL Workbench. This script will be in the resources folder as well. If you encounter any problems just editing the current procedure, which I'll do here now, I'll be creating this manually by editing another procedure, so I'll open the add album return counts procedure using the tool icon. I'll change the name to add album, in, out, counts, and I'll change that fourth parameter from an out parameter to an in, out parameter. Before I apply these changes, I'll scroll to the bottom and add an if statement around the code that sets the value of the count parameter. In this case, I'll check if the number of records that got inserted equals the count passed as a parameter. If this were a real scenario, I might do something additional like log the information or pass data to an audit table or raise some kind of error. I'll hit apply again, then finish. I'll refresh the schema panel. I'll see my third stored procedure there, and now I can use it in my JDBC code. I'll again go to an SQL editing panel and delete the data for Bob Dylan. Getting back to my Java code in IntelliJ, I'll make two changes to my code. First, I'll change the name of the procedure I'm calling, so from add album return counts to add album in out counts. Next, I'll pass an initial value to parameter 4. Normally, this would be the record count you expect to be inserted, but I'll just set it to an arbitrary number, like 10. I'll call setInt here, and parameter is 4, and the value of count is 10. I'll run this. So even though I passed in 10 as the count to parameter 4, you can see that I'm getting the actual count back, 13 and 14 songs inserted there. If I rerun it immediately, without first deleting the data, you can see that 0 records were inserted, which is what you'd expect in this case. Now I'll switch over to MySQL Workbench and once again execute my delete statement. And now, right back to IntelliJ. Before I run the code again, I'll first comment out the line where I'm setting the fourth parameter to an initial value, 10 in this case. I'll see if I can run it this way. And yes, you can see this does actually run. But the results are misleading. Notice that I did get data back when I just deleted it before running this code. This means this code must have added the data, but it says 0 songs were added for each album. There's a couple of things going on here I want to talk about. First, even if I don't set the in-out parameter to a value, it will get initialized to a default value depending on the data type and the DBMS vendor. Here, count wasn't initialized to 0, it was initialized to null. And null has unexpected and sometimes confusing results in SQL code if you're new to it. In this stored procedure, I first check if count is not equal to I, and if it's not, I'll set count. The reason this returns false when value is null is because the null variable represents an unknown value. In databases, a variable or parameter that's null isn't equal to, and it's also not equal to, another value. This had an unexpected result here and could produce unexpected results if a null parameter value is used in SQL statements. The moral of the story here is that you should always initialize your in and in-out parameters. This way, you can avoid any unexpected behavior that could arise, as we're seeing here. I'll uncomment that line there, so this code is operational. Okay, so those are the two ways to get data back from a stored procedure. There's another way to get data back from stored code in the database server, and that's by using callable statement, but executing a function rather than a procedure. A function's purpose is to return a value, usually the result of some calculation or formula. In contrast, the stored procedure is often used for performing a sequence of operations, data manipulation, or enforcing business rules within the database. So I'll continue in the next video and look at MySQL functions and how to execute and use them with JDBC code.